Test, test. You got me? Check, check. Check. Okay, good. Check, check. Test, test. That is loud.
Ready to go? Well, good morning and thank you all for being here. Yesterday, my property tax plan, Senate Bill 96, passed the House State Affairs Committee. And some of you will have noticed that I also testified in support of a different bill in that same committee, Senate Bill 245. That bill is Speaker Hansen's proposal to deliver statewide property tax by dedicating the 0.3% in sales tax that is due to sunset next year. And it has my full support. Together, those bills represent the largest property tax cut in our state's history. I said at my State of State address that my bill doesn't have to stand alone. It works well in tandem with other areas. Both bills will be on the House floor in coming days. And I believe Senate Bill 96 is up today. And we've been having conversations ongoing with legislators about that. And my team will be working to make sure that both get across the finish line. But I'll back up, because this truly is an example of how good process leads to good policy. From time to time, Speaker Hansen and I, and you'll find this hard to believe, but from time to time we've had our differences on issues. But that's okay. I recognize the fact that Speaker Hansen's only human. He's going to be wrong from time to time. But I worked with him and with Leader Odenbach and with Leader Melhoff on the package of property tax bills that we can all support. That package includes both targeted and statewide relief. It includes both short-term and long-term relief, and it adds greater predictability and transparency to our property tax system. Josie is going to hand out one-pagers on what that agreement is now, and I'd be happy to take questions on any of that. I'll say this, the bottom two bills on that sheet have both been amended, and they're still working on them. I'm committed to the concept of those bills, and I'm very open to discussion about what the final form should look like. We're taking this agreement one day at a time, one bill at a time, and I think that was very intentional that we left these concepts in 4 different bills. Senate Bill 96 is on the floor today, and we're working on that, and then we'll work on the rest of it. We're about a week away from the end of session, and I'm very happy how things have been going. We do a lot of things right in South Dakota, and our legislative process is a good example. The legislature comes here for less than 40 days, they fix what needs fixing, and then they go home and live with the laws that they passed. As I often say, good process makes good policy, and good policy is very much more important than politics. So with that, I will turn it over to questions.
Yeah, Governor, on process, I figured you would bring up process on this, as this is you coming together with a lot of lawmakers. Can you just give us a little bit more detail on kind of how this all worked out, how you all ultimately came together on these proposals?
Yeah, it's through the years, it's been kind of similar. I've talked to a lot of times about the power to convene, and especially as we've went up the ladder, that power has been it's been emphasized to me just how effective that is. And so I started out. I had my top advisors and the people that are around me that I've worked with for decades on property taxes, and that I have a lot of keen respect for their insight. And we laid the cards on the table. I says, let's take a closer look at some of these plans. And some of the information that came out even in that there were some aha moments for me, even with Senate Bill 245. And the way I had an issue with the .3 just writing checks, random checks, and every homeowner gets a check for $400. That was just wrong-headed and it completely missed the mark. The revelation I had was when we looked at this through the lens of making adjustment to the general fund education mill levy. That hits the mark because the people that need relief the most get the most relief. And so that, coupled with my plan, that made a lot of sense. And then we looked at some of the other areas that add transparency to the process, add predictability in some of the smaller bills. And so we kind of filtered through all the ideas that were on the table. And there were like 70 bills, I think, this year dealing with property tax. And I believe the timing was right for a lot of reasons, but we have filtered through a lot of those. And the legislative process was pretty effective in taking a lot of bad ideas off the table. And so we were left with kind of a boiled down pool of ideas and bills that have already been vetted, and coming up with a package, a proposal. I met with leadership in both chambers to lay out those proposals, initially with the House leadership, because most of the bills that we were talking about were in the hands of the House, and then extended that to the Senate leadership. So it was just a process of convening meetings and then putting ideas together and reaching consensus.
I'm sure your team that looked through 60 to 70 bills has their own thoughts on this, but I am curious if you think there was any merit to that process of just really throwing darts at 60 to 70 bills. That's just a lot of ideas being lobbed. Do you think there's kind of a value to that way of going about things with an issue like property taxes?
Well, I said in my opening remarks that it's a good process, and it's fairly arduous, and it can be very frustrating sometimes because there is so much stuff coming through. And, you know, in other times, maybe there are less bills introduced, which also helps the process. It doesn't help to have a lot of, you know, just hundreds of bills. We had freshman legislators that were bringing 20 bills. And that's the part that I'm a little critical of, because in the old days, you know, when you were a new legislator, you kind of learned the process before you dove into the deep end of the pool. And so that's my vantage point anyway.
Governor, about a half hour ago, Senator Carl Perry compared crafting this kind of policy to a game of whack-a-mole, which is, you know, it's really not a game that you win. It just kind of gets faster and faster until you get a high score. So with that in mind, when you're crafting these kinds of coalitions and this kind of policy on something so big like property tax that touches every aspect of civic life, what's the mentality as you enter this kind of battle, as it were?
Well, I think the mentality for me and for my team is, you know, just focusing on good policy and conservative values. I mean, when I looked at these proposals, you know, first we want to cover our goals of targeted relief, and then a broader sense, you know, a fairness point in statewide relief. And there was, I think for me, part of the process was understanding that point 3 that's coming off next year. There were tons of ideas already floating around of people kind of anxious to get their hands on that point 3, that $110 million, and looking for ways to spend it. And if you add that thought pattern into the mix, it's like, what better way to spend it than to give it back to the citizens of the state of South Dakota? And so that was part of my thought pattern as far as gaining support and taking a different vantage point view of Senate Bill 245.
I'm looking at House Bill 1253, talking about stabilizing assessment growth at no more than 5% per year, and so trying to prevent this over evaluation of properties. But then the next bullet point talks about how there's every 7 years there's going to be a catch up, and so I guess I'm a little confused as to like why that's in place, because if these ideas to protect the unbelievable inflation of certain properties, why are we trying to do these catch ups?
Yeah. Well, rather than spend a lot of time answering that, I think the bill's already been amended to 5 years. And that bill's going through the process right now, and there's been a lot of questions like that coming forward. I could take a lot of time explaining what I think it means, but I won't, because it's a work in progress. And like I said, it's a separate bill. It will stand alone. And so I'm more focused on the big two in the package, which is Senate Bill 69 and 245.
Can I add one thing?
Sure.
Yeah, and just to reiterate that, because I just came from upstairs and was talking to people about this bill. And as the governor said, it is a work in progress. It's been amended. There's talk about amending it again. You know, the goal of that bill from the beginning has been to smooth out assessment increases so that instead of going 0, 0, 30, 0, you can go, 7.5, 7.5, try to smooth this out so it's not such a jolt for people. And that is still the goal, and I think there's still a lot of conversation going on about the best way to achieve that.
So the idea is that it won't be, the catch up is not going to be all that drastic because of these limited increases in valuation.
That would be the hope, and again, as the governor said, maybe there's a different way of doing it that, we don't want to get too far into the particular bill as it's written right now, but keep it high level about this is what the goal is here.
Governor, sorry.
Yeah, Governor, earlier the Democratic leadership was in here on Senate Bill 96, and they said that your team is, quote, scrambling because you didn't put together the various coalitions to help get this bill stakeholder. They didn't really say who that was, but what's your reaction to that?
What? Well, my reaction is I don't know what they're talking about. This bill has been out, Senate Bill 96 has been out there for over a year. You recall, we laid the concept out at the tail end of session a year ago, where I explained that I didn't want to try and push that through. If we'd have done it a year ago when we first come up, that would have been scrambling. That was over 12 months ago, so to say we're scrambling, I think is very much a misnomer.
Governor, I know you recently rode along on, sorry.
Oh, I would only add to say that it was put out a year ago, and we have done a ton of stakeholder engagement on this bill over the last year. County groups, city groups, schools, I don't even know who all, Farm Bureau, many of whom endorsed and supported this bill in committee. So this is, as the governor said, this is not something that was last minute. I don't even remember another time when a bill was unveiled in the last week of session the year before it was introduced. I mean, I'm not sure there's been a bill that's had a longer period of engagement and discussion than this bill has. And I would say for 245, the other bill, that particular bill came out earlier this week, but the concept of that bill is not a new concept either. I mean, there was even a former legislator from District 13 who brought a bill like that a year ago. So, I mean, these are not new ideas that we're talking about here.
I think it was just a combination of all these bills Sorry. I think it was just the combination of like all of these bills kind of coming through at the last minute that they also took issue with.
Well, yeah, maybe that is what the perception is, but again, that's the reason we left these bills in separate bills so they can be discussed separately, and we're proposing them as a package. And where that ends up, I'm very much supportive and been outspoken on Senate Bill 245 and Senate Bill 96 working in conjunction. And he forgot to mention town hall. We had town hall meetings across the state in the last couple months as well.
Governor, just a technical question. How will property owners see this property tax relief?
How will they recognize the relief?
Yeah.
So, yeah, good question. Different process in both bills, actually. If a county opts into the half-cent sales tax, and their tax notice, the county will collect the half-cent sales tax will be remitted to the county on the tax receipt. When they pay your taxes, it'll show what your taxes were and how much they've been reduced as a result of the half-cent sales tax. Monies collected will go into a property tax relief fund, and then they will be given to the county to pay down the owner-occupied county portion of their taxes. On the other bill, I have to think through it. Well, we're reducing the general fund education mill levy. That mill levy was the appropriate place to do it because the only mill levy that segregates the three classes of property: commercial, owner-occupied, and ag. And so it will reduce the mill levy by the appropriate amount statewide, and so the reduction will come in their tax bill through the reduction of that mill levy.
And just to clarify on that point, the legislature sets the levies for general education, special education.
Exactly right. The levy bill used to be called the Cutler-Gabriel Amendment that we worked on every year. It's actually the levy bill. It'll be one of the last bills that's taken up, that after all the numbers are in and the budget is settled on, That's when they set the numbers based on the math for each one of them and adjust the mill levies accordingly.
We're gonna go to the phones for a few questions and then we'll come back to the room. Okay, seeing no one on the phones, we'll head back to the room.
Governor, you mentioned 96 and 245 working in concert with one another. But just hypothetically speaking, let's say one passes and the other doesn't. Would you then veto that other bill, or would you continue forward with one or the other?
Well, I certainly, I won't comment on a veto, but I don't think so. I mean, we're gonna work to get them both across the finish line, and we'll see where we end up, if they're amended, if they've changed, but, you know, I won't comment as far as a potential veto.
Governor, I know you recently, a second time after being deported, it looks like they re-entered prior to the Trump administration taking over. I'm curious what you make of that, and just on top of that, what you learned on that ride along.
Well, yeah, you know, it was an interesting day. I kind of got there on the late side. We'd been working our way across the state, and so jumped in with them. I was really kind of impressed with what I learned, just in the efficiency and the professionalism of our officers and their mode of operation, even their contacts that they made, and it was assuring to me to see how they handled their jobs, and just the professionalism and how they could spot stuff that we'd be driving along and all of a sudden we'd do a U-turn and they'd seen something that tripped a trigger and that I would have never noticed as a civilian. So it was impressive that way. And even for the gentleman that was apprehended, just the way he was handled and the way he was treated with respect, and even as they were taking him away.
Governor, I realize the legislature sets state government's budget. But what, have they communicated with you at all what their plans are regarding state aid to education, what the increase will be?
Yeah, we've been having ongoing conversation as their conversations have evolved, as we get closer to the end, and I'm not gonna get ahead of the legislature, but, you know, I think they're looking, and I think it's no secret that they were looking for something greater than the 1% that I proposed, and even as I propose that as a new starting point. And so I think they're still going through the numbers and getting the final numbers put together, but it won't be long, and we'll have the information of where we're gonna land on that.
Governor, there was a law, like a property tax relief program that passed last year that's kind of putting a limit on the increase in owner-occupied properties, setting that at 3% for the next 5 years with some other kind of limitations. How would this property tax package affect that or kind of interact with that at all?
It wouldn't affect that. That would still stand. The countywide assessments on owner-occupied could still not increase more than 3%. Although I'll say that looks more and more now like that's going to be less of a problem. And I said it a year ago that we have a pretty sound tax system on the property tax, and I was optimistic that ship would start righting itself. And I think we're already seeing evidence of that happening statewide.
We have time for 2 more questions.
Yeah, Governor, I am curious what you make of the Ellsworth involvement with the military operation in Iran, and also if you could just expand. I know you posted a message on social media in support of the U.S. operation there. Can you just elaborate on both the Ellsworth involvement, maybe what kind of knowledge you have of that, and then again, just your overall feeling about the U.S. operation in Iran right now?
Well, as I've said, I am very supportive of President Trump's decision with the attack in Iran. And as far as our involvement from Ellsworth, you know, it makes me proud of our state and the contribution that we're making to those efforts for world peace, and to be able to participate in that kind of an engagement is pretty incredible. But it also serves to me as a reminder of the announcement that I made in the State of the State that defense, national defense, would be the next big industry in South Dakota, because we have so much potential there. And I think this was a demonstration, another example of the nation looking to South Dakota for the help and their support in these kind of efforts. And we have so many resources that lend to just build the case for national defense being a huge part of our economy in South Dakota.
Governor, there's a bill that's gonna, it's on track to potentially outlaw cell phones from being used statewide across different classrooms. A lot of people have pointed to the reason why that bill should pass is like test scores in the state not really improving with all the money that we continue to invest in education. So my question, I guess it's also a two-parter, like, do you support that idea of having this statewide cell phone ban, and do you have any concerns about the, you know, our scores, our test scores in the state?
Well, I'll start with the answer to the big question about the bill on cell phones. And this been asked and answered in this room before, and I'll say it again. My wife, First Lady Sandy, is here today, and that was part of her initiative from the beginning, was again about cell phones in the classroom. And the answer that she's got from any number of administrators and the evidence that we've seen is that I think I could say almost literally all of the school districts, well, I know everyone we've talked to, and they've been surveyed. Every school district that we know of in the state right now is either considering or already adopted policy on cell phones. And I've said it all along that governs best that's closer to the people. We have school boards for a reason, and the decision is best left with them. And they're stepping up to the plate and making those decisions. And I think that's the right way to handle it. As far as some of comparing that to test scores, they're two completely different conversations, because I'm not saying that they don't impact. We're on the front end of school districts taking steps to ban the cell phones in the school, so we won't know what kind of impact that'll have long-term on the quality of education. We're taking other steps in reading and math in South Dakota, some pretty dramatic steps to improve the outcomes there.
Thank you, guys. We appreciate you being here. Feel free to shoot me a message if you have any unanswered questions.
Thank you all.